Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy, Gsluke. Got ourselves the Mexico Open this week, heading to beautiful Vidanta, Nuevo, Vallarta, El Juego de Golf in Mexico. Sorry, got to get the gringo out here, obviously from South Florida. Know a little bit of the Spanish language, but excited to see them teeing it up at a golf course that really favors one skill set. So for those that are willing to do their research, dig into the stats, these are the sort of weeks that you find some of the bigger edges to be had. So looking forward to it. Had a crazy day out on the links already. So excited to hop into the craziness that is PGA DFS. But on my 8th hole today, went out, me, my best friend, my brother as well out there, went for a little 9-hole shenanigans. And on our 8th hole was a par 3. I went up there, missed the green to the left. In fact, it was about 2 feet from the water. My brother goes up there, ends up dunking a shot, hits it just past the hole, ends up spinning back for a hole-in-one. We go up to the hole. We couldn't believe it. It's actually in the hole. We go back because my best friend still has to hit. He hits his shot, and it directly dunks into the same hole. So it's a good thing my brother took his ball out because there's a good chance it would have ricocheted off of his ball and ended up coming back out. But honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen it before or heard of it before. Back-to-back hole-in-one. So, obviously, we enjoyed ourselves a little bit. I got a little Crown and Coke here as we speak. So craziness from that perspective, but obviously excited to hop into the golf here now. So Nick says, why isn't the Mexico Open on Cinco de Mayo? For real, right? Just embrace the culture, make it even more fun. I have to say, I'm definitely going to be going to the Mexico Open at some point. It looks like an absolute blast. How did you not make a hole-in-one today too? Yeah, I wish, man. I've never made one. My brother's made 2. My buddy Ian, I think he's made 4 or 5 at this point. I'm still sitting on cero, as they would say down there in Mexico. You guys are going to laugh at me the entire time, but I'll be mixing in those Spanish jokes the whole time. What's going on? Travis says, smash the like button. I love it. Mark says, 2 hole-in-one on the same hole. Yeah, back-to-back shots too. So it was just us 3 playing. Good thing I got out of the way quickly, right, to let them do their job. Pretty crazy. You caught 2 balls in one night in Fenway. Probably the same kind of odds. Yeah, it was crazy. It's regular Crown, but yeah, honestly, if I had vanilla in this, it's Coke too. It'd probably be even better. So the next time I get out to the store, I'll have to get some. He said for 5 lineups, if you go with a Rahm Final start, that leaves 62.25 left. Yeah, honestly, I'm going to have a lot of GPP lineups that do so. I'm assuming with your 5 lineups, right, you're probably putting that in some sort of GPP. I like it for that kind of format. Single entry, I think it's a little bit risky, right? I mean, you have to spend in the 6K range at least twice for your last 4 players there. It's a tough scene, right? But if you're willing to embrace that volatility, which it seems like you're going to, like you said, is it giving up that much missed cup equity? I don't think so. So I kind of said it with my core plays video, and I especially talked about it on the value plays video. I don't think there's a huge difference between the guys that are like $7,300 and then the players that are, let's say, $6,600. There's not a bunch of guys I'm playing below 6,500, but in that 66 to, let's say, $6,900 range, there's at least close to 10, I believe like 7 or 8 guys that I'm playing in my GPP pool that you can make those sort of lineups work. So yeah, I'm with you there, man. I think there's a lot of top 5 equity to be had between those 2 players. And it's a little bit of an interesting week. It's different, right? Normally we have at least 5, 6 studs that are going to be competing there at the top. It's really just 2 this week. I know guys are trying to sell us on Woodland, sell us on Wyndham Clark. We'll talk about those guys a little bit later. They're nowhere near the same sort of players. And I will stand on that hill. Is there a Spanish version of the stream? Maybe afterwards, right? It'll be like Spanish Mass. We'll go into the Spanish version. Super Clean says, what do you think about Harry Hall making the cut? I think he's got a good chance. He's got the length off the tee you need. Really good putter. So yeah, I think he's going to make the cut. I would be behind that. I'm not sure what the odds, what you're getting for that in terms of your sportsbook odds, but I have to imagine it's better than a 50-50 prop. Considering length, thoughts on Brandon Matthews? Yeah, longest guy on tour. I have to worry about the rest of his game because outside of that team event, he's missed like every single cut. So if you're going to look into that made cut, that top finish with Sean O'Hare as perhaps signs of things to come, which I think is a fair assessment, right? I mean, obviously, I know it was only 50% of the output, but that's still a significant amount. Went out there, finished in the top 10 there. Yeah, the length definitely fits that course. First time doing a broadcast in Spanish, not knowing that you know Spanish. Yeah. I'll be mixing them in. Don't worry. You need a guy $6,100 or cheaper. Oh boy, Mark. I'll look later, but I'm definitely not going that low. Fading Rahm in single entries. How dumb are you? Yeah, I know how you play. You're not dumb. So I actually asked my buddies out on the course. I gave them the whole rundown this week on DFS, and asked them what they would do. Both of them, right? My brother and my best friend both said they would play Rahm, but they probably wouldn't play him in every single lineup. And I asked the bartender, I asked the waitress, the cart girl out there. The cart girl, right, probably doesn't know what she was talking about because she doesn't watch golf. But everyone that kind of knows the sport, understands what they're getting into with Rahm. So I think it could go either way. I could see. Let's just talk about it. Let's just bring up the player pool. We're going to talk about the course here in a second too, weather, as we typically do. But someone brought up the Jon Rahm question, and I'm already going down that rabbit hole. I'm playing him this week, and I'm going to make this abundantly clear in exactly 50% of my lineups. And I know there's going to be somebody that screenshots this, goes, oh, you're paying the rake. Oh, you have no idea what you're doing. Well, I'll point you to last week, where if you look at me, one of the top golf players when it comes to PGA DFS, you look at Whistles Go Woo, Osmo, a lot of these other top players, Mock Lovin, for example, Utica, that are going out there and maxing not only the $5 GPP and the $20, right? I'm only doing the $5, right? There's a lot of these guys that are doing the $5 and the $20 every single week. Last week, they played 30%. Most of them, I believe every single player that I just mentioned played exactly 30% of the Benny Ann and the SH Kim group. That is exactly what I did last week. And what that was matching the field, right? You're taking a non-stance on a player. I've heard so many people say that when you match the field, you're paying the rake. That is the case if you were to do that for all 6 spots in your lineup. If you do so for one of your 6 spots or one of the, say, the 25 to 30 players in your player pool, you are not paying the rake. You are choosing to take a non-stance on that player. That is something that top players do all the time for other sports. They do it for golf occasionally. Right. I mean, last week, because it was a condensed field, right? Only 79 teams. It was a little bit of a different beast. But this week with Jon Rahm is also a different beast. We're dealing with somebody that's plus 275 to win the golf tournament. That just doesn't happen, right? So we have to treat it a little bit differently. And the way that I see it this week, you could play 0%, right? Single entry, of course, right? You only have one lineup to deal with. I'd be perfectly fine with it, right? You're taking a stance against Jon Rahm, albeit a small chance that he goes out there and busts. When that happens, you're going to have huge leverage over the field. I understand that play. I also understand locking him, right? Let's say you really want to get leverage on Jon Rahm, right? You want to make him one of your big decision points, right? Where you win a lot of quote unquote win in your GPP this week, right? I'm fine with that too. Going out there, getting well over the field. But what I'm doing this week is I'm splitting the field in half. I'm taking 50%. I do not care if that's over the field. I don't care if that's 5% under the field in the contest that I'm in. In single entries, I'm probably going to play Jon Rahm. I may have one lineup that has Jon Rahm in it, right, up there at 12K. And then the other single entry I play is likely to start with Tony Finau, right? So I'll be matching the field on Jon Rahm in my quote-unquote single entries, and then I'll have that leverage to Tony Finau that I need. So that's essentially the way I'm playing it this week. I don't think that's the wrong answer. I don't think you're paying the rake if you do so. So if your tout tells you that you're paying the rake for playing 50% Jon Rahm, I would just push back against that, right? Again, I don't have the crystal ball. I can't tell you what the best play is, but what I can tell you is that last week in a similar situation, plenty of the top players, including myself, who won 6x last week when it came to DFS, had 2 top 20 lineups in the $5 GPP, matched the field on a lot of those chalky players. So I know fading Jon Rahm, just to get to your question there, Nick, I had to do the Jon Rahm rant. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think locking him's fine too. And I think that matching the field is just fine. And anyone that tells you otherwise is insane. Like there's arguments to be made for all 3 scenarios, and it all depends on your intention, right? Like if you want your week to hinge on Jon Rahm, then play 0 or 100%, right? Make your stand. But if you don't, which I think honestly might be the prudent play, especially if you're playing 150 lineups, right? You also have to consider, I'm not playing 20 lineups, right? I'm not playing single entries, right? I'm all in on the GPPs this week. I have 150 bullets, right? For me, it's much easier to take the 50% stance. JP says, have you changed your mind on Fratelli? Absolutely not. Dude, you guys got to realize there are players like Fratelli that I play every single week. Guys that are $6,400 that make no sense, that in the past have shown a ceiling. Dylan Fratelli, let's look at his ownership, right? Just speaking of the devil, right? Let's go down here. $6,800, 2.6%. Honestly, higher than I probably expected it to be at. But what, you play him in 5% of your lineups and you get leverage? To be 5% of my lineups, which is 7 or 8 lineups out of my set of 150, is like $40. It means next to nothing to me, right? Whereas if Dylan Fratelli goes out there, has his, one of his 2 or 3 top 5s, top 10s that he has every single year, I'm going to have the nuts at 2%, maybe even less ownership, right, in some of those single entries. So, no, I've not changed my mind. Absolutely not. You had an ace and hold out from the fairway on a par 5 and an eagle. So you had a hole out, an ace, and another eagle. Jeez Louise. And you shot 18 over on the other 16 holes. Yeah, that's the way that golf is, right? When you're going out there, you have the shots of your life. It's normally when you're playing one of the worst rounds of your life. Yesterday, I drove the living hell out of the ball, hit almost every fairway, was smashing it. Today, I couldn't hit a fairway for my life. So such is golf. First time question, I bet, for sure. Hey, Luke, you like Dylan Wu and Aaron Rai? I like Dylan Wu. I like the ball striking. Aaron Rai, I do too. Aaron Rai, he gains a lot of strokes off the tee, and that's because of his accuracy. He's one of the more accurate players on the PGA Tour. So I don't know what to think about Aaron. I like Aaron's ball striking. I like his long iron play, but I'm not sure if I love the fact that he's not very long off the tee. Year-long season, Bramlett, Griot, SH Kim, pick 2. So for year-long fantasy, okay. I like that, by the way. You're saying pick 2 of the 3. I like Bramlett because of the length. Griot has played well on past Palm in the past. You got to ask yourself if that's a small sample size thing, if you think that's a legitimate trend. I tend to trend towards the second. I think it is legit there with Emiliano Grillo. So I'd say the first 2. SH Kim, he doesn't just strike me as the best course fit. We'll say that. Everyone, please hit the like and subscribe button. Nick does another one of content for us. Love it. You're my tout. I got you. Hey, I'm saying if anyone else is shaming you for not taking it, it's all right, right? You have Finau on 50% of your lineups. You like him with Hogard. Your thoughts? I love Finau on 50%. In fact, that's exactly what I have, Mark. So I'm right there with you. And he said with Hogard. So yeah, I think Hogard's all right. In terms of ownership, it's not crazy, right? Was he 13.6%? You can easily get leverage to that sort of number. Yeah, I'm okay with everyone from Wyndham Clark down. But there's a few favorites that I have. So I guess we'll just discuss it. I have Jon Rahm on here. We did the rant, right? I'm playing him in half my lineups. I'm playing a bunch of Tony Finau too. In fact, I haven't ran my final run, but ideally I'd like to have like 55 to 60% Jon Rahm and about 50 to maybe 60% Tony Finau, something in that range. I want to have one of the two in every single lineup. And then I want a small subset that also has them together. So I know somebody asked the question before. You're going to have about 68.5 remaining per line on player. If you play these two together for your last 4. Sorry, that was a mouthful there. But I'm going to have that in probably 7 to maybe 10% of my lineups. I would love to have them in 10 to maybe 15% of my lineups, but just knowing the kind of exposure I have down here in the 9K range, it's probably not going to be doable. If you want to start with a Tony Finau and then go to Nikolai Hogard, the rest of your lineup is a lot more straightforward, right? It's $2,500 you're saving off of a Jon Rahm, as opposed to having 68.5 remaining, right? You're probably close to like 7,400, maybe even 7,500 remaining for your last 4 spots. You can add in another 8K option to that sort of build. I totally get it, right? Nico Hogard might not be my favorite play, Mark, truth be told. But those sort of lineups where you're taking one of these guys up top, whether it's a Rahm or Tony Finau, right? Pick your favorite. I love both of them up there. They make a lot of sense. Now, let me just give you an idea of my exposure. Wyndham Clark, Gary Woodland, Hogard, a lot of these guys in the 8K range, to me, are overpriced and overowned. A lot of them only have ownership because of their pricing. They're up there on the top end of the 8K range. They're there on the bottom end of the 9K range. So people are going to spend their salary. And rather than being, let's say, 7 to 10% owned, like a lot of them probably should be, they're in the 12 to 15% range, right? They're about double the ownership of where they probably should be. And they're more expensive. Let's add that, right? Like Taylor Pendrith should not be $9,200. I'm still playing them. We'll talk about why in a second, right? This 5.4% ownership number probably has a lot to do with it. The point is that This 9K range, this 8K range, I don't love. The odds, are reflective of them having a decent chance of winning this week. I frankly don't see it. I think that Tony Finau or John Rahm is winning this golf tournament, and I just have had that inkling since Monday morning. It has not changed here to Wednesday evening. I've done all the deep dives I can, right? I've looked into all the course history, right? Only 1 year. I've done all the deep dives on course fits, narrative city. I mean, looking at the Corn Ferry Tour results at this event, right? And I'm still just so sold on these two guys up top. In fact, my outright bets are the core plays, and then I added John Rahm to it. And then I bet Will Gordon as well, and I bet Akshay Bhatia. Those are my outright bets for this week. And actually, I have a sprinkle on Cameron Champ, right? But a majority of my money is on these top two bets. I'm sold on the two. I honestly think that there's a good chance that one of them wins and the other one finishes in the top 5, which is why I want to have lineups that are jamming both of them in together. The byproduct of that is that I think these 9K guys might be irrelevant. And I know that's a scary proposition, but like Wyndham Clark, I really don't think is that good. Gary Woodland has been around forever. There's a reason why he hasn't won in God knows how long at this point. Nico Hogard, he's a newcomer to tour. He shouldn't be $9,500. I think he has upside, but again, I'm not sold on him as one of the best players in this field. In this 8-9K range, like Rye, he's actually, I have to say, he's one of the better plays in that range that I can't really talk shit about. But like Benny Ann, like this guy's normally $7,400. I know he had a decent team event, but it's a team event, right? He was only 50% of that output. Bill Hostler, I was trying to convince myself to play Bo, right? He's a long player off the tee, but he hasn't gained on approach in more than one of his last 7 events. Around the green, he's always around neutral. So he carries himself off the tee with the putter, which would be fine for a 7K golfer or even a $7,500 golfer, but he's $8,800, right? It's just nasty. This whole 8K range, especially this 9K range, is just nasty to me. So I'm making my stance. I'm taking chalky plays, right? But I'm not playing a lot of guys above 9K. My player pool is a lot smaller this week than what it typically would be towards the top of the board, just because I think that there's such a talent gap difference between these top 2 players and everybody else. So just wanted to point that out from the strategy perspective. As up top, I'm very condensed compared to most weeks. A lot of that is because I'm playing 50% of both of these guys up here. But outside of that, right, because I'm taking, these guys that are in the 10K range, I can't even play a lot of the guys in the 9K to begin with, right? Or else I'm going to be spending down to $6,400 remaining per player, which in this week of field is probably non-advisable. Let's see. Let's catch up on chat. Lost my spot. Let's see. Thoughts on the player you think is the Toxic X? Yeah, I'm playing him. I'm playing Norton this week, and it's on a hunch, right? He doesn't even fit the golf course. He's not a long player, right? His long irons are very average, especially considering his baseline averages. Alex Noren, though, he pops at random courses. And I think the only reason I talked myself into playing him, the ownership, right? He's one of the lower owned players in this range, right? He's not the lowest owned, but he's definitely in the lower half of ownership. But mostly because he can miss wherever he wants off the tee. He has 40-yard wide fairways. The rough is essentially non-existent. So as long as Alex Noren, fingers crossed here, right? Because I have a feeling that you're going to play him too, Nick, isn't shanking them into the water out there, which there is a lot of water. That is a legitimate outcome, right? But if he avoids the water from fairway in, he's one of the best players in the world, let alone here in this field. So yeah, I'm with you. But that off the tee play, I mean, you're very familiar with what can happen there. It can go sideways quickly. You made your hole-in-one on the front 9 of your home track at the turn. Everyone was waiting for free drinks. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you make a hole-in-one, you've got to buy free drinks. We weren't able to celebrate completely because I had to come back and do the stream, right? So tonight maybe we'll meet up. They want to go to Hooters, so maybe I'll meet them there. Luke Listweek seems to be the same vein as Champion Fratelli. You're correct. The one thing I'll say is that he's more expensive, right? He is $7,800, but the ownership is still relatively low. So as you might have guessed, I am playing Luke List this week. It's the same kind of idea, not the best putter, kind of pops from time to time. What I really like about him is the long iron play. He's one of, if not the best player from over 200 yards in all of the PGA Tour. Mostly because he's probably the strongest player in all of the PGA Tour. That's not an exaggeration. He's probably literally the strongest guy out there. So yeah, I like it. It's a Luke List course. You're just excited that you're getting a Boo weekly appearance. I love it. They have props for him on Prize Picks, which I think is great, Brant. JP says, any weather to consider? Yeah, let's talk about it. I meant to go back to that, right? We got sidetracked by John Rahm, I have to say. Yeah, in terms of weather, there's not a bunch that I'm considering because it looks beautiful. So for Thursday and Friday, it's almost the exact same forecast. Maybe it's just Windfinder being a little bit lazy. But when I looked over there in Willy Weather, when I looked on AccuWeather, just weather.com, they're calling for next to no wind. I mean, at the most, I think I saw 10 miles an hour over there on the Willy Weather forecast, but it was for like an hour on Friday. So you're looking at perfect conditions. Based on what we saw last year, it does look like the afternoon is a little bit more gusty than the morning, which for a Florida course, for anything in the tropics, is to be expected. I honestly couldn't tell you why, right? I'm not a meteorologist, right? I'm not a air physicist, a particle physicist that's going to be able to tell you the reasons why. But I can tell you, as somebody that lives in South Florida, right, and that had eyes last year watching this golf tournament, it's a little bit more windy in the afternoon than most. So yeah, if anything, if you're playing Showdown, play the morning guys, right? So if you're playing Thursday Showdown, play the guys teeing off in the morning wave. Same thing for Friday. Just rinse and repeat that strategy. For DFS, not that I'm seeing. I don't see an edge to be had, any huge differential between the two waves. Because look at this, right? The Thursday morning, super calm, right? Like 1 to 3 miles an hour. Friday morning, between 1 to 3 miles an hour. And then in the afternoon, it's between that 6 to 8 mile an hour mark, 6 to 8 miles an hour for both days. So it's the exact same forecast. And like I said, that is rinse and repeated across all of the other wind sites. So yeah, honestly, a little bit refreshing. We don't have to worry about the weather so much this week. I think it's a little bit more straightforward than most. Can't do rye. It's the two gloves for you. It's the iron head covers for me, to be honest with you, Rob. What do you think about Toasty crushes the ball? I think that Toasty is going to be steamed. Toasty, might be getting steamed up instead of toasted this time around. So I understand the play. Trust me. He's like one of those community plays. What is he? He's like $6,400, right? Super cheap down here. All right, I'll stop guessing. Okay, my O is behind my cord, so I feel like it's gonna unplug my mic. Is it not? All right, find me Toasty. Not Kodira. There we go. Alejandro Toasty. I have him at 4.4% ownership right now, which might not seem crazy, but look at it comparatively, right? 4 times as much as the guy above him. He's like 3 times as owned as a Kevin Roy. He's 5 times as owned as a Ryan Moore, right? Who's very accomplished on the PGA Tour. Paul Haley's been pretty decent as a rookie, right? He's 4 times lower owned. Tyson Alexander, Grayson Murray, who I actually kind of like this week, a bomber off the tee, right? 4 times lower owned. I mean, 4% is not crazy, right? It's not like you're going to duplicate yourself because you're playing Alejandro Toasty. It's just that you're going to corner yourself into this, sphere that we're in, PGA DFS, right? People that are consuming content. All of those people are going to be the ones that are playing Toasty. So you may run into some duplicates. You may have some issues with your leverage compared to some other guys around him because, these $6,500 golfers, right? I'm playing in like 2% of my lineups, maybe like 3% for somebody like a Grayson Murray, who I actually like this week. I don't really want to play 9 to 10% Alejandro Toasty. So that's what I have to say about it. I respect the research, Mitch, but I think so many people have brought him up. I've seen him mentioned at least 5 times this week on relatively popular podcasts. I've seen him bet for top 10s, top 20s all over Twitter this week. I have a hard time thinking that he's going to be an easy guy to get leverage to. Like if you were to put him in 3-4% of your lineups, you're probably matching the field, at least per my ownership projections. So that's my worry there. I understand the play though, right? I've seen the numbers, right? He drives it like 304 on average. 304.7 is, I think, the number that I saw cited. Has decent finishes of late over there on the Korn Ferry Tour, which you cannot write off. That is a very competitive tour. So I understand the play. I just think that he's getting steamed up. At least my ownership projections think so. Ryan Gainey would be a lethal combo last week, both with the 2 gloves. Tommy Gainey, right? He's in the field this week. Good old Tommy Gainey. He must just take any opportunity he can get to get out there. Norton does well in shitty fields. Not a bad play. Yeah, I agree. Honestly, you play Alex Norton when it makes no sense, because if you play him at a difficult track where he fits the track, where he's even going to be getting some ownership because people respect that, he normally ends up missing the cut by 5 strokes. How does he putt on this surface? Let's check. It's a good question. There he is. Passed him. He's way more expensive than he should be. He loses about 0.57 strokes per round. So not good. Not good at all. When it comes to the putting on fast follow, don't use that as a reason to play him. Are you going to talk about your fades and sleepers? Yeah, sure. So the fades that I was going to talk about, I didn't do a video on them this week. Got out on the golf course. It was going to be Wyndham Clark was going to be one of the fades, and then Harry Hall was going to be the other. And it's not because I think Harry Hall is a horrible play. It's because that he's 12.2% owned and by far the highest owned guy here, when I think he's an average play at the very best. So those were going to be the fades. The sleeper plays were going to be, what is it? It's Pendrith. Where the fuck's Pendrith? I'm blind here. Oh, there he is. $9,200 and McNeely. There it's 6.1% ownership. So $9,400, $9,200, 5-6% owned, have not been playing that well of late. But if you look at the long-term stuff, are some of the best players in this field, right? Like if we were to just take a time machine, right, and we were to skip back 3 months, if I told you that McNeely was 6% owned in this field and only $9,400, you would want to jam him in almost every single lineup that you had. You'd say the same thing about Pendrith, his form 3 months ago. Unfortunately for them, right, the last 3 months happened, right? McNeely got injured and then sucked when he came back to tour. Pendrith has lost his putter. He's completely lost his off the tee play for whatever reason. That's happened, right? We can't ignore that, but they also shouldn't be essentially unowned in this field. So yeah, those two are my sleepers. And then the fades were Wyndham Clark, who I just think is overrated. And then good old Harry Hall, which no disrespect to Harry Hall. I don't get why he's the highest owned guy there. Will there be any more underdog slips? Probably. Or the lines. Yeah, it depends on the early play tomorrow. So I'll probably take a look at the board after the first hour or so of play and react to that. So probably not before lock. Last year, Fina only had 5 bogeys in 3 and 1 round. Thoughts on his prize picks unders? Yeah, I think they make sense. I more like him for DFS because he lost 2 strokes putting last week as well, or I should say last year as well. So I think he's got room for improvement there. Obviously, kept the clean card last year. His tee to green play was outstanding there in the first iteration. So yeah, I like it. What's it? He's 67.5, right? Just let me double check on that. I know that's what his strokes were earlier today. Yeah, 67.5. His birdie or better line's 5. Yeah, I like the strokes line for sure. Is Eric Cole a guy who's a bad wave? Is he worth taking as the last guy in? Yeah, I don't even have a bad wave this week, to be honest with you. So I'm not that worried about it. In terms of skill set, I don't love his off the tee play. He's not the best off the tee player. Let's see. Let me find his last 36 rounds. He's towards the. I must have passed him. There he is, $7,500. Loses off the tee, right? Losing close to half a stroke per round, but gains across the board. So last year, let's just talk about it. There was one player in the top 15, one out of the top 15 finishers that lost strokes off the tee. And the other 14 gained over 0.35 strokes. That one player, Ches Reavie, who gained over 6 strokes on approach. He gained 5 strokes with the putter and 3 strokes around the green. So absolutely killed it outside of the off the tee play. It's going to take one of those kind of performances to get into the optimal lineup, right? If you're going to be one of those off the tee players that just can't gain 3-4 strokes this week. So Eric Cole, he's capable of doing it. It's just that he's got a real small avenue to that success. It's going to be tough seeing, right? So the fact that he's 7% owned, I have a hard time playing him when you're going to have to put him in 15% of your lineups to get that leverage. So there's going to be that guy this year, maybe even 2-3 of them that finish in the top 15 that lose strokes off the tee. It's just going to be really hard to predict who those players are. Tommy Guinea likes hookers. He told me, guys, that move it right to left. Good to know. What got you off of Alexander and Young? The off the tee play. So good observation there. I had him in my player pool. The last 36 rounds, I was looking at their distance numbers. I was looking at just their off the tee numbers in general. Let's see. Let me show you guys what I was looking at. Carson Young, right? Losing off the tee, is actually even losing across the board over his last 36 rounds. So I liked the approach play. I liked the putter for Carson Young. That's why I was getting to him. But when I looked at his driving distance averages, they talked me off him, right? He's not a bomber that I'm looking for. Same thing with Tyson Alexander. So let's find him on here. It's not that much cheaper. I'm blind, by the way. Every time I do this, I end up skipping over the players. Yeah, there he is. $6,500, right? Losing in the ball striking categories, gaining in the short game. That's kind of his MO. If it wasn't a long 7,400-yard par 71, I'd probably get to Tyson Alexander. But yeah, just more deep diving, more looking at the metrics got me off of him. To piss you off even more is PrizePicks running commercials here now. Yeah, they are, and they're not even legal in Louisiana. So maybe they're trying to soften it up, right? Try and get the legislation to let them in there, Nick. So yeah, if they're showing ads there, they've got to be getting close to getting some sort of deal done. So yeah, you'll be pissed off for now, Nick, but when they get there, you'll be a happy man. Does making 5 or 6 consecutive cuts mean a lot for this course? Not saying for Rahm or Finau. If you mean in terms of recent form, sure. For sure, right? If you've made 6 straight cuts, I think that's a good sign of things to come. But of course, they've only had 1 year at the Mexico Open. So there's only 1 year of course history to deal with. But yeah, if you're talking about recent form, of course, yeah, recent form is a big deal. Let's talk through a few lineups. So we've gone through a few of my top plays. I mean, I don't want to bore you to death with just talking about players, right? My player polls on the Patreon as per usual. But what we need to focus on this week is building our lineups, because I've already told you I'm matching the field on a Jon Rahm, right? So when I'm playing him, somebody that's going to be nearly 50% owned, right? What am I considering, right? What am I making sure to keep in mind? Which, of course, is probably even more important than the guys you're playing. So let's put Jon Rahm in there and envision ourselves building a GPP lineup. So for the largest field contests, for maybe this contest, right, that has 35,000 entries, maybe it's for the $5 GPP that has nearly 60,000 entries. Whatever the case, in these larger contests, when you're obviously trying to take home a top 5 finish to get those top end payouts, you're going to have to differentiate. So whether it's leaving salary on the table, whether it's taking 2-3 guys that are going to be sub 3% owned, that's how I'm approaching it. So Jon Rahm is a great pairing with either a McNeely. Maybe you go with McNeely, or maybe you go a little bit cheaper and go down to Taylor Pendrith. Either way, mixing in somebody in this 9K range that's going to be sub 6% owned is almost a life hack to playing Jon Rahm, right? Because even though Jon Rahm is 50% owned, well, now you're multiplying that if you're doing, what do they call it? I can't even think of the word for it. When you multiply all the ownership numbers together, right, you get a metric, and that tells you essentially what percentage of lineups should have this lineup, right? When you add in a 5-6% owned player, right, it completely plummets that 50% owned player. When you add in another guy that's going to be like 5-6% owned, it's like multiplicative product. When someone says it in chat, I'm going to feel like an absolute dumbass, but you guys get the point. Either way, when you add in all of these super low owned players, it doesn't matter if you have a 50% owned player, because when you're mixing in that guy that only 5% of lineups are going to have, and if you do 2 or 3 of them, you have yourself a unique lineup and probably a ton of leverage to the field. So if you start with Rahm, we go with Pendrith. In the 8K range, I'm going to take another low owned player. And let's see, a great example, perhaps Garrett Higo. Garrett Higo is your lowest owned player there in the 8K range. By mixing in these 3, we still have $6,800 remaining, and essentially all the leverage we need, right? If we want to take a few guys that are getting ownership, we can still do so. So if I want to take an Akshay Bhatia who's still getting a little bit of steam, I have no problems with doing so. In this 6K range, if I want to take, I don't know, let's put Werbelow in there. Actually, do not hate my boy Werbelow this week. That leaves us with $6,500. You take one more shot down here in the 6K range and you call it a lineup. If you want to be a little bit less aggressive about it, right? Maybe rather than an $8,300 Garrett Higo, we go down here, we toss in a Patton Kizzire. I mean, just whatever you guys prefer, however you want to build your lineups, that sort of thing. It's not that hard after you have in a few pivots, right? So we have Pendrith as a pivot in this lineup. Kizzire is going to be like 5-6% owned. Werbelow is going to be sub 1% owned. So we have 3 guys we know are going to be mega low owned. I mean, even Bhatia is going to be like 7% or lower. There's no problems with playing this 50% owned guy. So people will tell you that you're paying the rake if you're playing a Jon Rahm, right? Just differentiate elsewhere. Just know that it's going to take a little bit more to differentiate yourself and embrace that. The few things to avoid, right? If you're starting with Jon Rahm, I would heavily guard against taking chalky pieces, right? So I think a lot of people this week are going to try and start with a Jon Rahm and then take like a Wyndham Clark as their second man in. First problem is that's a lot of salary, right? You're already down to $7,000 remaining, but down here in this 8K range, you have to take a pivot, right? You have to start differentiating because you already have 2 mega chalky guys and you're already down to like $7,000 remaining. So like you're dealing with multiple problems already after having these 2 players in. So if you're going to differentiate at this point, right, like this is where you're forcing in like random plays like Molinari, who I think sucks this week. Like I'm not even going to play Molinari. but like you'd have to take somebody that's essentially unowned. Like maybe it's Doug Gim. I don't like. There are guys in this 7K range that are 1.5% owned or less. You're going to have to force in those sort of plays. Whereas if you don't take a Wyndham Clark, you take that pivot in this 9K range, just kind of what I prefer for this sort of golf tournament. You don't have to force in the plays that just suck. Like there's no reason to want to play Doug Gim this week or a Molinari. Like they've been literal dog shit for like quite some time, and they're overpriced for this kind of field. Like I would rather pivot in the 9K range when like guys like Pendrith have legit upside, McNeely have legit upside, right? We talked about Higo a little bit. Even Ben Martin's actually not even getting that much ownership, but like, let's see, Brandon Wu you could take a Wallace. He's not getting that much steam this week. I mean, again, Wallace, right, won like 2 or 3 starts ago. They're at another course with Paspalum, right? Just mix in those sort of guys if you're going to play a John Rahm. If you want to get a little bit more chalky about it, let's say you want to go Tony Finau and then a Wyndham Clark, I'm much more willing to do so, right? If you want to take those sort of guys that are in that 15 to 20% owned range, just mix them in with Tony Finau. Like if you're going to do it with John Rahm, it puts you into such a shitty situation. Like you can make it work, but you're really having to force things in at that point. Let's catch up on chat. Then we'll talk up through a few more lineups. Luke said Ben Martin you would pick this week. I'm definitely playing him. I don't think he's going to win. Yeah. I'm playing him because I think he has top 5, top 10 upside. I wouldn't bet him outright for that much money, right? I don't think he's like one of the guys you should expect to win. I think that's Tony Finau, John Rahm are your top 2 finishers there. But yeah, I think he's a good play. Norman Steam is crazy. Yeah, what's his ownership at? I'm avoiding him, right? And it's because of the Steam. I got him at 8.1%. Well, that's double Doug Gim. That's double Henrik Norlander, who's like a same kind of guy. Like it's almost triple Harry Higgs. Yeah, that's crazy. But he's a good player, but yeah, crazy Steam. There's always one guy who misses like 5 straight cuts and then top 5s at an event like this. It's Cameron Champ. It's Cameron Champ, Nick. Last year he finished T6. He's gonna finish top 5 this year. Just get a VPN, Nick, for Prize Picks. Cheers to that. Just like my mom needs to get a Prize Picks account. Pesky limits over there. For single entry, do you suggest studs and duds or balanced? For single entry, I'd go a little bit more balanced. I probably wouldn't play John Rahm and Tony Finau together in my single entry lineups. Maybe in one of them, I would go in that direction, but a vast majority, yeah, a little bit more balanced. Cut Master Werby, that is correct. What's going on down there? I'm playing him this week. I got sold. I mean, I looked at the around the green and the putting numbers. He's like $6,600 this week. He's definitely more expensive than he should be. It's kind of unfortunate, but he's 0.4% owned. Yeah, I'm playing him. Hey, if he makes me a cut. All right, we lost connection, but we're back. Hopefully it wasn't too long there. Let's make sure our mic's going. I have no idea what happened. All of a sudden, my screen went blank. So, all right, we're back. Yeah, I love Werbelow, though. I guess talking about Werbelow put us into the Matrix. That wasn't good. Any thoughts on Holly's cousin, Jose Toledo? Holy Toledo, his cousin. Jose Toledo, I've known nothing about him, right? He's one of those like 6K golfers, huh? He was getting some ownership steam, I saw. A few sites were projecting him for like 2-3%. What the hell was he? $6,300. So they gave him a good price tag. I know nothing about him. I couldn't tell you, but yeah, Holy Toledo's cousin there. I love it. Honestly, these are the kind of guys that just like randomly show up at these kind of events. I mean, just thinking about it, Rafael Campos nearly won the Puerto Rico Open a few years ago. He nearly won Corrales a few years ago too. Jose Toledo might be that guy. Just based on his name, I'm assuming he's a local. You're confusing you. On one hand, you say recent form counts, and then you tuck up Pendrith and Champ. It all depends on ownership, right? If you're looking at a low-owned guy who's got great form, I love it, right? But if you're talking about a guy who's essentially unowned, right, but long-term is one of the better players in the field and just of late has been struggling, I love it, right? It all depends on a case-by-case basis. So that's why you say you're confusing me. Yeah, because there's no cookie cutter method to playing DFS, right? If there's a guy who's high owned and has really good form, well, that should be expected, right? So maybe it doesn't mean as much as opposed to somebody who's like low owned and has really good form, right? That's something to consider because they're not getting all the steam and maybe they should be because of that form, right? So yeah, there's no cookie cutter way to play DFS, Mark. So if it's confusing you, it's because it should, right? All of these decisions are not black and white, right? There's no, okay, if this, do this, right? There's no like if statement that you can use to play DFS. It's much more nuanced than that. I've got to go to 5th grade homework. Peace out. Good luck, guys. 5th grade homework. Good luck with that. You're probably on like, you're factoring at that point. If you're doing math work, that kind of thing. Good luck, Nick. When you get back to the quadratic formula and shit, you're in for some fun. Thoughts on Larry Griffin? You mean Lanto Griffin, I'm assuming. Larry Griffin sounds like should be his name. He looks like a Larry, to be frank with you. He looks good in my modeling, so I knew he's a little bit cheaper. Where's go to Lanto, $7,500. Looks great in the modeling. He's number 27 from that perspective. Number 20 in terms of his course fit. He's got the length you need. He's a little bit longer than your PGA Tour average player. I like him, and I think he's going to be a little bit lower owned. You'll have to do some research. Yeah, I don't know anything about him. There's a bunch of those guys in this field. So Jose Toledo is one of them. Omar Morales, Zachary Bashow. I don't even know who these guys are. Like Jose Cristobal Islas, Roberto Librija. No idea who these guys are. Sebastian Vasquez. Honestly, Sebastian Vasquez, that sounds like a pitcher in baseball. That's like coming from the Dominican Republic. Honestly, I feel like I've seen that name before. Like Raul Pareda, right? Like I don't know who these guys are. I know one of them. I know Alvaro Ortiz. And is Carlos Ortiz's brother, who, of course, Carlos, right, plays on the Live Tour at this point. And Alvaro is apparently pretty good. And he's played on the Corn Ferry Tour. So I suppose he's the one guy, Latino American player that I know in this field. Like Mateo Fernandez de Oliveira, no idea. Jose de Jesus Rodriguez, no idea. I think they're pretty irrelevant for Larchville GPP. So I don't know if I'd stay up all night researching it. Larry Griffin. Is there a Larry Griffin in this field? Am I tripping right now? There's no chance. Yeah, Larry Griffin. Good old Lanto Griffin. We need a Lanto Griffin on tour, that's for sure. All right, let's talk through the cash plays and then let's get into some props and hop on out of here, right? 742. I think we're doing pretty good on time. So if you're playing cash, you're playing Jon Rahm this week. It's straightforward. It's simple. If you're not playing Jon Rahm in cash, you're probably not making the right kind of lineups. And if you're not playing Jon Rahm in cash, please send me a head-to-head. But if you're in here, this 8K range, like you want some of these ball strikers, right? So I would say a Ben Martin based on his ball striking form. Fantastic play for cash. I would lump Aaron Ryan into that same conversation. He's been gaining a bunch off the tee and on approach of late. In this 7K range, see, I'm on the wrong tab here. In this 7K range, we're looking for guys that are ball strikers. So I don't hate Batia, right? He's been posting decent numbers. Let's try and go a little bit cheaper, though. I want to be as balanced as humanly possible here. This is where I don't hate eating chalk, but you want to be taking guys that are consistent, right? So, like, I'm drawn towards Charlie Hoffman because of the skill set, right? Tee to green of late has been fantastic for Charlie Hoffman. He's starting to look like the Charlie Hoffman of 2-3 years ago that was posting a bunch of top 10 finishes. Let's put Batia in there, right? Like I said, I really like Batia. We're going to have to take one real cheap player in here, but I don't hate Kyle Westmoreland for this kind of build. So the one real cheap cash play I think you can get to this week would be a Kyle Westmoreland. He's long off the tee, decent approach player when he's playing well, and has made the cut in some strong fields, right? So Corrales, another past Palm course, was able to make the cut. If your guy at $6,300 makes the cut this week, that is a huge W when it comes to your cash lineup. He made the cut at the API. That was probably his most impressive performance. In fact, he was in the top 5 of that event after day one. Let's see, he made the cut at Pebble Beach. Pretty impressive field. Houston Open. He has some missed cuts mixed in here, but with this strength of field, given the fact that he's long off the tee and really long off the tee there with Kyle Westmoreland, I like that for cash. Like if you're going to take somebody that's super cheap, maybe go that direction. The other way to go about this, right, would just to be not to take 2 8K guys, right? To spend down a little bit. Maybe take a Will Gordon instead. If you do so, there's no need to take a Kyle Westmoreland. You can be a little bit more balanced about it. Callum Turan, worth noting, I really like this week. His approach play has still been there, even though the results haven't necessarily followed suit. So yeah, you could use him in a cash lineup, and I wouldn't hate it either. But the real cash cornerstones that I would be like building behind here, not to rip off my boy Kenny Kim over there on Matt Mayo's channel. Sorry, shouldn't be using those kind of terms, right? You got your terms, right? I'll stick to my terms. But your top cash plays of the week, right? Respect to Kenny there. It'd be like these three guys. It'd be Aaron Rai because of the ball striking ability, John Rahm, no brainer about it, and Will Gordon, who, if you haven't heard my spiel about it on the value plays video, I am all over Will Gordon this week. He's one of my top plays, regardless of price. He's one of the guys down the board that I actually bet outright this week. So take a good look at my boy Will Gordon if you haven't already. T36 at the Chilean Classic. It's got to be some correlation. You're probably right. It's probably past Paul. There's a Larry David joke in there somewhere. I just can't find it. With Larry Griffin there. No Sean O'Hare. Yeah, no Sean O'Hare for myself. I have a hard time playing some of those old farts that are just, they're past their years. Numbers look good though, right? Just let's put some respect on good old Sean O'Hare's name. Let's see. Gaining on approach, gaining around the green, right? I think the off the tee play might screw him a little bit at this sort of golf course. And yeah, I mean, the longer term we look at Sean O'Hare, the worse it gets, right? He's a neutral off the tee, losing on approach now, right? And really only gaining around the green. So yeah, I'm not a huge Sean O'Hare guy. I think if you put him last week, you're probably pretty happy about it. All right, let's talk about some props. So if you want any prop advice, well, do I have some props for you over here in Prize Picks? So this fairways board, I'm almost certain it was mispriced. So it looks like they have started to bump a few things, but they haven't bumped everything. So we'll definitely have some stuff to talk about here. First and foremost, actually, let me stop sharing my screen. I'm going to bring up a tab here on my Explorer, show you guys exactly why I think that Prize Picks made a pretty big mistake with their board. All right, share my screen now. All right, so this is the Pro Visualizer for Vidanta Vallarta. Now, Vidanta Vallarta is a par 71 for the PGA Tour. It's a par 73 typically, right? But look how many par 3s there are. There are 5 par 3s on property. That means that there's only 13 holes with a quote-unquote fairway to hit, right? Over here in Prize Picks, there is, first off, no mention of that, right? Typically, they tell you how many fairways they are. So they're either intentionally trying to mislead people on here, or they just don't know that there's 13 fairways. And the reason why I think the second is the more likely of the two outcomes is because their board was priced way too high. I mean, to have anyone at 9.5 fairways is ridiculous. You only miss 3 of your 13 fairways and still hit the over. And then to have, they had Wyndham Clark at 8.5. They had Ben Martin at 9.5 fairways. They had McNeely was at 8.5. Same thing with Norn and Hostler. Those 4 players are all, and I'm talking about these guys that were at 8.5, are all outside the top 100 on tour when it comes to driving accuracy. And the average last year for fairways was 8, and that's per Data Golf. And the reason why I mentioned that it's per Data Golf is on Data Golf includes intermediate cuts, and every single fairway on this golf course has an intermediate cut. So it's hard to really put an exact approximation on it. I typically lower the average by a solid 5%, and that's usually the projection I go with. That's close to an average of like 7.6, 7.5 fairways, right? And these are below average drivers. Like I said, Clark, McNeely, Norn, and Hostler were outside the top 100 when it came to driving accuracy. They should be projected for like 7 fairways, right? Not 8.5 like that they were at. So I smashed the unders on those. Those were posted on, the Patreon and whatnot, but there's still unders you can take here. Gary Woodland is like number 80 on tour in terms of accuracy, right? You could easily take his under. Akshay Bhatia is not the most accurate driver. You could take the under Ben Martin at 9, right? He should be 8.5 at the very best, right? He was at 9.5 earlier. I would still take the under there at 9. Rahm was at 9.5. I took his under, right? Now he's down to 9. You can mix in like everyone on the board that hasn't been bumped. I'd be okay with taking their unders because I think that they just don't know that there's 14. That there's not 14 fairways, that there's only 13 to be had. And on top of that, the average last year that they're using for a lot of their projections is too high, right? It includes the intermediate cut, which when you're actually counting the ones for the PGA Tour, which is the stat provider that they're using, right, to settle these props, it doesn't include that, right? So you probably shouldn't be using that average to determine your average props on there when that's not truth, right? So I like a lot of the unders there. Greens regulation, there's a few unders I like too. Patrick Rogers was at 13.5. Now he's down to 13. So I don't love that nearly as much. But Tony Finau, I love him this week, right? I bet him outright. I think he's probably going to win this event. He should not be at 14 greens regulation. There are 6 par 4s over 490 yards. That's difficult to hit the green regulation. There are 2 par 3s over 200 yards, right? Like that's not a cakewalk. That's 6 of your 18 holes that are really hard greens in regulation. So when you only have 4 to deal with, like the under there. Hogard was at 13. I took his under. Let's see, McNeely at 13. I know we already took his under for fairways. You could take that. Pendrith, actually, he's a morning tee time. Well, actually, yeah, Pendrith at 13, you could take there too. Some of these guys, like even in the morning wave, should just not be at 13. The average for greens in regulation, just to give you guys an idea, is 67.9%, which is about 12.2 greens. But just like this driving accuracy number, that includes the fringes. At this golf course, every single green has a fringe. So again, it's hard to really put a number on it, but you have to imagine the average is probably like 11.5 greens, right? Not the 12.2 that they're showing on here. So I think there's a lot of unders to be had, even with the relatively benign conditions. I think they're over projecting a lot of the field, whether it's based on the fact that there's only 13 fairways or based on the fact that their green regulation board's way too high. In terms of underdog, I only have one slip in, and I entered it on Monday. I haven't entered anything since because the board just not the best. I think if you're going to enter anything now, and the props that I had were overs on 1.5 bogeys. It was Taylor Pendrith, Alex Noren. I think McNeely might have been the last one there. That was there at 1.5 bogeys. They're at 2 now, right? So they got bumped. So I don't like them nearly as much. You can take their overs for birdies, right? Their morning tee times. I like Pendrith this week. I like Alex Noren. I do think they're going to make some bogeys, as pretty much everyone's going to at a course with a bunch of 500-yard par 4s. But 4 birdies or better. The average was about 4 last year. And then these 2 players are better than average players. So I personally can't even enter this card because I already maxed them out for their bogey card. But if I hadn't, I probably would enter these 2 at this point. So that is worth noting on that end. Let's catch up on chat. And if we don't have any questions, we're going to hop on out of here. Jack says, stat for those who want to oppose Rombo. No Masters winner since Phil Mickelson has gone on to win in April or May. So best efforts were Spieth in 2015, who won the Open at Chambers Bay. So yeah, that's a major championship, right? So maybe you throw that one out. There's probably something to that, Jack, right? A little bit of a hangover after winning the Masters. John Rahm's been on a ton of podcasts over the last few weeks. Don't think you're crazy. Can you briefly explain values versus sleepers? So yeah, so my sleeper plays are more ownership based. The value plays are more based on just price tag. So value play is my top plays, $8,000 and below. The sleeper plays are looking for low ownership numbers, right? Guys that are lower owned than they should be. So for this week, right, I liked Maverick McNeely. I also like Taylor Pendrith. That's because they're 5-6% owned when the guys around them are 12-13% owned plus, right? They're about half the ownership of their peers. So sometimes it'll be in the 9K range, like we had with those 2 with the sleeper plays, or sometimes they'll be $7,000, right? So it's very dependent. But yeah, one's based on ownership, one is based on price tag. But that's all we've got, guys, for the stream. Looking forward to this weekend. Not the best field, but like I said, I expect there to be a relatively large edge. Just the bomber narrative, I think a lot of the casuals aren't really going to lean into that all that much. And of course, from the game theory perspective, based on how you want to handle John Rahm, I mean, you could leverage that way more than you typically can on slates, right? I mean, if you lock them, right, you're getting a ton of leverage to the field. If you play 0%, you're doing so too. If you decide to take the punt approach like me and play 50%, which kind of takes the fun away with that, like I said, it's kind of like a cop-out move, but when you're playing 150 laps like me, right, you can afford to do that kind of thing. It's going to be a fun week, right? Whether you're supporting Rahm, you're rooting against him, or you just don't care like me. But best of luck with those lineups. Best of luck with the outright to go with. Hopefully, if John Rahm or Finau don't win, which, again, I have outright bets on both of them. Just my card this week, I'm not going to win that much money if I end up winning, which is the funny part, especially if it's one of those 2. If it's not one of those 2, it'd be really nice if Will Gordon got the job done. But best of luck, and I'll catch you guys for the weekend in those showdown streams.